The East African Community is an intergovernmental organization comprising 5 countries in the African Great Lakes region in Eastern Africa: Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania and Uganda. Uhuru Kenyatta, the President of the Republic of Kenya, is the EAC's current chairman. The organization was originally founded in 1967, collapsed in 1977, and was officially revived on July 7, 2000. In 2008, after negotiations with the Southern Africa Development Community and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, the EAC agreed to an expanded free trade area including the member states of all 3 organizations. The EAC is an integral part of the African Economic Community. The East African Community is a potential precursor to the establishment of the East African Federation, a proposed federation of its 5 members into a single state. In 2010, the EAC launched its own common market for goods, labor and capital within the region, with the goal of creating a common currency and eventually a full political federation. In 2013 a protocol was signed outlining their plans for launching a monetary union within 10 years. The geographical region encompassed by the EAC covers an area of 1,820,664 square kilometers, with a combined population of about 149,959,317. History. Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda have had a history of cooperation dating back to the early 20th century. The customs union between Kenya and Uganda in 1917, which the then Tanganyika joined in 1927, was followed by the East African High Commission from 1948 to 1961, the East African Common Services Organization from 1961 to 1967, and then the 1967 to 1977 East African Community. Burundi and Rwanda joined the EAC on July 6, 2009. Interterritorial cooperation between the Kenya colony, the Uganda Protectorate and the Tanganyika Territory was first formalized in 1948 by the East African High Commission. This provided a customs union, a common external tariff, currency and postage. And also dealt with common services in transport and communications, research and education. Following independence, these integrated activities were reconstituted and the High Commission was replaced by the East African Common Services Organization, which many observers thought would lead to a political federation between the 3 territories. The new organization ran into difficulties because of the lack of joint planning and fiscal policy, separate political policies and Kenya's dominant economic position. In 1967 the East African Common Services Organization was superseded by the East African Community. This body aimed to strengthen the ties between the members through a common market, a common customs tariff and a range of public services so as to achieve balanced economic growth within the region. In 1977, the East African Community collapsed after 10 years. Causes for the collapse included demands by Kenya for more seats than Uganda and Tanzania in decision-making organs, disagreements with Ugandan dictator Idi Amin who demanded that Tanzania as a member state of the community should not harbor forces fighting to topple a government of another member state, and the disparate economic systems of socialism in Tanzania and capitalism in Kenya. The 3 member states lost over 60 years of cooperation and the benefits of economies of scale, though some Kenyan government officials celebrated the collapse with champagne. Each of the former member states had to embark, at great expense and at lower efficiency, upon the establishment of services and industries that had previously been provided at the community level. Later, Presidents Moi of Kenya, Mwai of Tanzania, and Museveni of Uganda signed the Treaty for East African Cooperation in Arusha, Tanzania, on November 30, 1993, and established a tripartite commission for cooperation. A process of reintegration was embarked on involving tripartite programs of cooperation in political, economic, social and cultural fields, research and technology, defense, security, legal and judicial affairs. The East African Community was finally revived on November 30, 1999, when the treaty for its re-establishment was signed. It came into force on July 7, 2000, 23 years after the total collapse of the defunct erstwhile community and its organs. a customs union was signed in March 2004 which commenced on January 1, 2005. Kenya, the region's largest exporter, continued to pay duties on goods entering the other four countries on a declining scale until 2010. A common system of tariffs will apply to goods imported from third-party countries. Geography: the East African Community covers an area that is slightly smaller than Mexico and slightly larger than Alaska at an area of 1,820,664 square kilometers. The EAC could be the 17th largest country in the world, if considered a single entity. Uganda, Rwanda and Burundi are landlocked countries but they are mostly very green. The African Great Lakes is home to four of Africa's highest mountains, Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, the Rwenzori Mountains and Mount Meru. Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro is also the world's highest freestanding mountain. Lake Turkana, located in Turkana County, Kenya, is the world's largest permanent desert lake and the world's largest alkaline lake. By volume it is the world's fourth largest salt lake. Lake Victoria is the world's second largest freshwater lake. It borders Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Lake Tanganyika is the world's second deepest lake and is located in western Tanzania. Kenya is home to the African Great Lakes' only desert, the Chalbai Desert in Marsabit County. Fauna: the EAC has all of the big five game, that is lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo and rhino. The wildebeest migration is widely considered as the seventh natural wonder of the world. Animals constantly traverse the Serengeti National Park and Masai Mara. Almost all types of big animals including elephants, lions, giraffes, zebras, grey-crowned crane, elephants, etc. are found in. Lions are found on the coat of arms of Kenya. The national bird of Uganda is the grey-crowned crane. The diversity of the African Great Lakes wildlife has garnered international fame, especially for its populations of large mammals. It's also famous for its diverse population of birds, including flamingos and Maasai ostriches. Flora: the East African Community is home to some of the most diverse flora in the world. This is because of the African Great Lakes' varying climate, arid and semi-arid areas in northern Kenya and Uganda, forests in western Kenya and Uganda, the African savanna that stretches across Tanzanian and Kenyan plains. Glaciers on mountains in central Kenya and northern Tanzania. Mangrove forest on the EAC's coast. Political dimensions: it is argued that key drivers for Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda are that Kenya wishes to export surplus capital, Uganda seeks an outlet for its surplus labor and Tanzania wants to realize a Pan-African vision. However, it is argued the commonalities go far deeper. Many of the national elites old enough to remember the former community often share memories and a sharp sense of loss at its eventual dissolution. More cynically, others argue this historical ambition provides the potential for politicians to present themselves as statesmen of a higher order, as representatives of a greater regional interest. Furthermore, EAC institutions bring significant new powers to dispose and depose to those who serve in them. Some question the extent to which the visions of a political union are shared outside the elite and the relatively elderly, further arguing the youthful mass of the population is not well informed about the process in any of the countries, while others point to an enhanced sense of East African identity developing from modern communications. Commitment to the formal EAC idea is relatively narrow, in both social and generational terms, and thus many question the timetable drawn up for the project. Fast-tracking political union was first discussed in 2004 and enjoyed a consensus on the subject among the three presidents of Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. Thus, a high-level committee headed by Amos Wako of Kenya was commissioned to investigate the possibility of speeding up the process of integration so as to achieve political federation sooner than previously visualized. Yet there are concerns rapid changes would allow popular reactionary politics against the project. There is an argument however, that there are high costs that would be required at the beginning and that fast-tracking the project would allow the benefits to be seen earlier. There remain significant political differences between the states. Museveni's success in obtaining his third-term amendment raised doubts in the other countries. The single-party dominance in the Tanzanian and Ugandan parliaments is unattractive to Kenyans, while Kenya's ethnic politics is not apparent in Tanzania. Rwanda has a distinctive political culture with a political elite committed to building a developmental state, partly to safeguard the Tutsi group against a return to ethnic violence. Other problems involve states being reluctant to relinquish involvement in other regional groups, for example Tanzania's withdrawal from COMESA but staying within the SADC bloc for the Economic Partnership Agreement negotiations with the European Union. Many Tanzanians are also concerned, because creating a common market means removing obstacles to the free movement of both labor and capital. Free movement of labor may be perceived as highly desirable in Uganda and Kenya, and of important developmental benefits in Tanzania. However, in Tanzania there is widespread resistance to the idea of ceding land rights to foreigners, including citizens of Kenya and Uganda. While generally the member nations are largely in favor of the East African Federation, informal polls indicate that most Tanzanians have an unfavorable view. Tanzania has more land than all the other EAC nations combined, and some Tanzanians fear land grabs by the current residents of the other EAC member nations. Expansion. Tanzania supports the expansion of the East African Community. In 2010, Tanzanian officials expressed interest in inviting Malawi, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia to join the EAC, but Malawian Foreign Affairs Minister Banda said there were no formal negotiations taking place concerning Malawian membership. South Sudan. The presidents of Kenya and Rwanda invited the autonomous government of Southern Sudan to apply for membership upon the independence of South Sudan in 2011, and South Sudan was reportedly an applicant country as of mid-July 2011. Analysts suggested that South Sudan's early efforts to integrate infrastructure, including rail links and oil pipelines, with systems in Kenya and Uganda indicated intention on the part of Juba to pivot away from dependence on Sudan and toward the East African Community. Reuters considers South Sudan the likeliest candidate for EAC expansion in the short term, and an article in Tanzanian daily The Citizen that reported East African Legislative Assembly Speaker Abdi Rahim Haidar Abdi said South Sudan was free to join the EAC asserted that analysts believe the country will soon become a full member of the regional body. On September 17, 2011, the Daily Nation quoted a South Sudanese MP as saying that while his government was eager to join the EAC, it would likely delay its membership over concerns that its economy was not sufficiently developed to compete with EAC member states and could become a dumping ground for Kenyan, Tanzanian, and Ugandan imports. This was contradicted by President Salva Kiir, who announced South Sudan had officially embarked on the application process 1 month later. The application was initially deferred by the EAC in December 2012. However, incidents with Ugandan boda operators in South Sudan have created political tension and may delay the process. In December 2012, Tanzania officially agreed to South Sudan unregistered trademark S bid to join the East African Community, clearing the way for the World unregistered trademark S newest state to become the regional bloc unregistered trademark S sixth member. In May 2013 the East African Community set aside $82,000 for the admission of South Sudan into the bloc even though admission may not happen until 2016. The process, to start after the EAC Council of Ministers meeting in August 2013, is projected to take at least 4 years. At the 14th Ordinary Summit held in Nairobi in 2012, EAC heads of state approved the verification report that was presented by the Council of Ministers, then directed it to start the negotiation process with South Sudan. A team was formed to assess South Sudan's bid. However, in April 2014, the nation requested a delay in the admissions process, presumably due to ongoing internal conflict. Sudan applied to join the EAC, but its membership is strongly opposed by Tanzania and Uganda, which contend that due to Sudan's lack of a direct border with the EAC, its allegedly discriminatory actions toward black Africans, its record of human rights violations, and its history of hostilities with both Uganda and candidate country South Sudan, it is ineligible to join and its application should be thrown out. Sudan's application was rejected by the EAC in December 2011. Somalia applied for membership in the EAC, but its application was rejected in December 2012. Panorama. Demographics. The combined population of all 5 EAC member states was 153,301,178 as of July 2014. The EAC would have the 10th largest population in the world, if considered a single entity. The EAC contains only 4 cities with populations of over 1 million, the largest being Dar es Salaam. Mombasa in Kenya is really close to getting to the 1 million population mark. Kampala is the largest urban centre located on Lake Victoria, the second largest freshwater lake in the world, and Mwanza coming in second and Kisumu third. The East African community's current urban population stands at 19.26% and the rate of urbanization at an average of 4.71%. Languages. Although one of the official languages of the EAC is English, Swahili is spoken throughout the African Great Lakes region and is also official. Swahili is a Bantu language with some vocabulary derived from Arabic, a result of trading between Arabs and locals on the coast. The remaining is mainly derived from coastal Bantu languages. At first the Swahili language used the Arabic script, but it now uses the Latin script as a result of colonization. In the EAC, there are 2 countries whose official language is French, Rwanda and Burundi. Numerous local languages are spoken, for example, there are 56 local languages spoken in Uganda and 42 local languages in Kenya. Kinyarwanda is spoken in Rwanda as well as Uganda. There are some native speakers of Arabic on the Zanzibar island of Tanzania. In Kenya and Uganda, the medium of instruction in all schools is English. It is rare to find people who speak fewer than 2 languages in the East African community. Religion. Christians in the EAC are divided among followers of numerous Protestant denominations and Roman Catholicism. The EAC is predominantly Christian, with countries such as Rwanda and Burundi having significantly more Catholics than Protestants. In terms of numbers, Kenya is home to the largest number of Christians in the EAC. However, the country with the largest percentage of Christians is Rwanda. The country with the largest Muslim population and percentage is Tanzania. The Muslim population in the East African community is concentrated around the coastal regions in Kenya and Tanzania and the eastern and northern regions of Kenya. 1 in every 10 Kenyans is Muslim. The only significant animist population is based in Tanzania. Economy, transport. Currently, Mombasa has East Africa's busiest port. However, the construction of a new port in Kenya, known as the Lamu Port, is underway. It's expected to cost $22 billion. Upon completion, the Bagamoyo port under construction in Tanzania will be the largest in Africa, with a capacity to handle 20 million cargo containers a year. 2. Africa's largest airport terminal is also under construction in Nairobi, dubbed the Greenfield Terminal. The terminal will be capable of handling 20 million passengers a year. The estimated cost is 55 billion Kenyan shillings. Business and finance. Even though Dar es Salaam has a larger population, Nairobi would be considered the business, finance and transport hub in the EAC. As East Africa's largest firms are headquartered in the city, including the region's largest carrier Kenya Airways, the region's largest media house the Nation Media Group, and the Kenya Commercial Bank Group, East Africa's largest financial conglomerate. Most multinational firms have their regional headquarters in Nairobi, including UNEP, which is the 4th UN office in the world, as well as the only UN office located in Africa, or any developing country. Nairobi is also home to the Nairobi Securities Exchange, the largest within the EAC. The exchange is Africa's 4th largest in terms of trading volumes, and 5th largest in terms of market capitalization as a percentage of GDP. Nairobi's JKIA is East Africa's busiest aviation hub. It handles about 5 to 6 million passengers a year. Africa's Silicon Savannah. Kenya launched the construction of a new technology city known as COMESA Technology City. The project is expected to cost $14.5 billion. It's intended to make Kenya and the region global players in the tech industry. Economic dimensions, importance of the customs union. The key aspects of the customs union include a common external tariff on imports from third countries, duty-free trade between the member states, and common customs procedures. Different rates are applied for raw materials, intermediate products and finished goods, the latter percentage is fixed as the maximum. This represents a significant decrease from what was previously the maximum in Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. However, this customs union is not yet fully implemented, because there is a significant list of exclusions to the common external tariff and tariff-free movement of goods and services. Technical work is also needed to harmonize and modernize the customs procedures in the EAC's major ports of entry. The expected revenue benefits are understood to be minimal by many analysts, based on comparative static simulation exercises demonstrating the one-off impacts of the immediate introduction of the CU's full tariff package. The findings suggest an increase in intra-regional trade that is largely the result of trade diversion, not trade creation, with some aggregate welfare benefits in Kenya and Tanzania but welfare losses in Uganda. From a trade integration perspective, the EAC may not be the best chosen unit, because the current trade between the three countries is small compared to their external trade, and the EAC's 105 million citizens do not represent a large market in global terms, given the very low average incomes. Emerging business trends. Business leaders are far more positive than economists about the benefits of EAC integration, its customs union as a step in the process, as well as the wider integration under COMESA. The larger economic players perceive long-term benefits in a progressively expanding regional market. Patterns of regional development are already emerging, including, Kenyan firms have successfully aligned to the lower protection afforded by the EAC CET and fears that firms would not adjust to a 25% maximum CET, or would relocate to Tanzania or Uganda have not been realized. An intra-regional division of labor is developing that results in basic import processing relocating to the coast to supply the hinterland. The final stages of import processing and natural resource-based activities are moving up country and up region either within value chains of large companies or different segments located by firms in different countries. Trade in goods and services has already increased as service provision to Kenyans and Tanzanians is already important for Uganda. Kenya exports financial services, for example via the Kenya Commercial Bank and purchase and upgrading of local operators in Tanzania, Uganda and Sudan. Uganda hopes integration will help support its tourism potential through integration with established regional circuits. There are signs of business culture oriented to making profits through economics of scale and not on protectionism. Trade negotiations. The EAC negotiates with trade partners on behalf of all member countries. Negotiations in 2014 for an EU-EAC Economic Partnership Agreement ran into difficulties with the January 2014 negotiating session failing to conclude the negotiations, which were scheduled to be completed before October 1, 2014. This caused tensions between Kenya and other countries as Kenya, which is not a least developed country, stood to lose most from the failure to reach agreement. Discussions are also underway between the EAC and the USA on the launch of trade and investment partnership negotiations. Poverty reduction. EAC economies have large informal sectors, unintegrated with the formal economy and large business. The concerns of large-scale manufacturing and agro-processing concerns are not broadly shared by the bulk of available labor. Research suggests the promised investments on the conditions of life of the region's overwhelmingly rural poor will be slight, with the significant exception of agro-industrial firms without grower schemes or that otherwise contribute to the coordination of smallholder production and trade. It is informal trade across borders that is most often important to rural livelihoods, and a customs union is unlikely to significantly impact the barriers that this faces, and taxes are still being fixed separately by countries. However, the introduction of one-stop border posts being introduced and the reduction in tariff barriers are coming down progressively. The establishment of a common market will create both winners and losers in the border areas. more substantial impact could be attained by a new generation of investments in world market production based on the region's comparative advantages in natural resources, and the new tariff structure creates marginally better conditions for world market exporters, by cheapening inputs and by reducing upward pressures on the exchange rate. Common market. On July 1, 2010, Kenyan President Mwai Kibaki officially launched the East African Common Market Protocol, an expansion of the bloc's existing customs union that entered into effect in 2005. The protocol will lead to the free movement of labor, capital, goods and services within the EAC. Member states will have to change their national laws to allow the full implementation of some aspects of the common market, such as immigration and customs. This legislation may take up to 5 years for each of the countries to enact fully, but official recognition of the common market took place on July 1. Kenya expects that its citizens will begin to enjoy freedom of movement in the EAC within 2 months. Kenya, Rwanda and Burundi have already agreed to waive work permit fees for EAC citizens. The common market is seen as a step towards implementation of the common currency by 2012 and full political federation in 2015. Kenyan businesses complain that the benefits of the common market only exist on paper by 2011, and that all the work remains to be done. Arbitrary rules and delays continue to make trade between Kenya and Tanzania expensive and difficult. The free movement of people in the EAC is set to be improved with the introduction of third-generation ID cards. These cards will identify the holder as a dual citizen of their home country and of East Africa. Third-generation cards are already in use in Rwanda, with Kenya set to introduce them in July 2010 and the other countries following afterwards. Mutual recognition and accreditation of higher education institutions is also being worked towards, as is the harmonization of social security benefits across the EAC. Plans. The new treaty may be fast-tracked, with plans drawn up in 2004 to introduce a monetary union with a common currency, the East African shilling, sometime between 2012 and 2015. There were also plans for a political union, the East African Federation, with a common president and a common parliament by 2010. However, some experts, like those based out of the public think tank Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis, noted that the plans were too ambitious to be met by 2010 because a number of political, social and economic challenges are yet to be addressed. The fast tracking is currently the subject of national consultative discussions, and a final decision was to be taken by the EAC heads of state in mid-2007. In 2013 a protocol was signed outlining their plans for launching a monetary union within 10 years. Single tourist visa. It had been hoped that an East African single tourist visa may have been ready for November 2006, if it was approved by the relevant sectoral authorities under the EAC's integration program. Had it been approved, the visa would have been valid for all 3 current member states of the EAC. Under the proposal for the visa, any new EAC single visa could be issued by any member state's embassy. The visa proposal followed an appeal by the tourist boards of the partner states for a common visa to accelerate promotion of the region as a single tourist destination, and the EAC Secretariat wanted it approved before November's World Travel Fair in London. When approved by the EAC's Council of Ministers, tourists could apply for one country's entry visa, which would then be applicable in all regional member states as a single entry requirement initiative. A single tourist visa for the EAC countries of Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda was to be available on January 1, 2014. However, the launch date was postponed due to bureaucratic issues. East African Court of Justice. The East African Court of Justice is the judicial arm of the community. The court has original jurisdiction over the interpretation and application of the 1999 treaty that re-established the EAC, and in the future may have other original, appellate, human rights or other jurisdiction upon conclusion of a protocol to realize such extended jurisdiction. It is temporarily based in Arusha, Tanzania. East African Legislative Assembly. The East African Legislative Assembly is the legislative arm of the community. The EALA has 27 members who are all elected by the national assemblies or parliaments of the member states of the community. The EALA has oversight functions on all matters that fall within the community's work, and its functions include debating and approving the budget of the community, discussing all matters pertaining to the community and making recommendations to the Council as it may deem necessary for the implementation of the treaty, liaising with national assemblies or parliaments on matters pertaining to the community and establishing committees for such purposes as it deems necessary. Since being inaugurated in 2001, the EALA has had several sittings as a plenum in Arusha, Kampala, and Nairobi. The current Speaker of the Assembly is Margaret Ziwa from Uganda, who replaced Abdiraheen Haidar H. Abdi from Kenya. The Assembly has been credited with crucial bills, particularly those regarding regional and international trade, including EAC's stand on issues such as the World Trade Organization and transport on Lake Victoria. East African Passport. The East African Passport was officially launched on April 1, 1999. The East African Passport has been introduced as a travel document to ease border crossing for EAC residents. It is valid for travel within the EAC countries only and will entitle the holder to a multi-entry stay of renewable 6 months validity in any of the countries. The passport is issued in 3 of the 5 EAC member states. The passports are available at the headquarters of the respective immigration departments in Nairobi, Kampala and Dar es Salaam. Only East African nationals may apply to be issued with the passports. The passport costs $10 or the equivalent in EAC currencies. Processing of applications for the passports will normally take 2 to 3 weeks. Although the passport is only valid within the EAC, modalities of internationalizing the East African passport were being discussed with the aim towards having a common travel document for EAC residents by 2006. Other measures meant to ease border crossing for East African community residents include the issuance of interstate passes, a single immigration departure entry card, the finalization of harmonized procedures of work permits and the classification process, and the compilation of studies on the harmonization of labor laws and employment policies. Internet in the EAC. Internet use in the EAC is still very low compared to developed countries. The East African community is a solid economic bloc with over a combined population of 149,959,317. More recently, there are several emerging EAC online platforms that amalgamate the African Great Lakes region. Internet speed is also low in the region compared to developed countries. There was a fiber optic line landed at the port of Mombasa in 2009 that serves the region, on top of long-standing satellite and dial-up. These are mostly in urban areas and relatively expensive. This is perhaps one of the main hindrances for online growth in the East African community. Leaders, Chairperson, 2012 Euro 2013 Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, 2013 Euro Presenter Uhuru Kenyatta, Secretaries General, 1996 Euro 2001 Francis Muthura, 2001 Euro 2006 Amanya Mashiga, 2006 Euro 2011 Ayuma Mwepu, 2011 Euro Presenter Richard Caesarborough. Comparison with other regional blocs, see also, East African Federation, East African Community Treaty, Economy of Africa, List of trade blocs, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, Southern African Development Community, Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, Economic Community of Central African States, Economic Community of West African States. References. External links, East African Community, East African Community in Europe, German and East African Community Cooperation, EAC Free Trade Agreement, Agri-Trade Agricultural Trade in East Africa.